Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
As your Prime Minister, I have done my level best each and every single day to help build a country that stays worthy of all Canadians. And although you'll always find me alongside you cheering along, their future and your future is now in your hands. Merci, mes amis. Merci pour tout.
Yes, Canada. Yes, Canada. The Liberal Party is united and strong and ready to fight to build an even better country.
For the Liberal Party of Canada, the Trudeau era is over. In the end, it wasn't even close. 86% of Liberals cast their ballot for Mark Carney. The leadership race is won. The election race is looming. And the era of Mark Carney begins. I'm David Smith. Today on The Big Story, I'm speaking with Nick McRoberts, Liberal strategist with Hill Knowlton and a former staffer in the Trudeau government. Hi, Nick. Thank you for joining us.
Always happy to be with you, David.
So, Nick, you were there in the room at the Rogers Centre in Ottawa on Sunday evening when the final results were announced. Why do you think the Liberals voted so overwhelmingly in favor of Mark Carney?
Yeah, the reaction in the room was palpable. There was an audible gasp that I don't think was, televised. But when I look at the results and when I look at conversations that I've had with Liberals about Mark's win, it's clear that this was about a new direction for the Liberal Party, a direction of fiscal prudence, of calm, of, a move back to the center. And when you look at the other candidates, at Karina Gould, Chrystia Freeland, and Frank Baylis, none of them really displayed that clear path towards change. Karina Gould was positioning herself as kind of the social candidate and the left wing of the party. Chrystia Freeland didn't do enough to separate herself from the current government, and Frank Baylis is a bit of that kind of just off in the weeds fourth candidate. And so when you take all that in, and you take the economic prowess and experience that Mark Carney demonstrated, along with a clear fundraising path, it doesn't surprise me that we're left with a resounding result, of almost 86% for Mr. Carney.
Yeah, talk to me about the fundraising side of it.
So the number that I'm floating around is $4.5 million in 2 months. That is just a huge number, especially when you look at how the party has been fundraising over the last number of years and lacking behind the Conservatives. What that means is that not only was Mark Carney able to fundraise the amount to be eligible to run in the campaign, they now have the Liberal Party coffers stuffed leading into a campaign. With the way that the rules are set up, they can now spend, however much they need to, $1 million or $2 million on attack ads over the next week or so before the writs drop, and then rely on already fundraised amounts. The Liberal Party is in a better financial position than they've been in, and I think they're ready to run a really aggressive campaign that's going to get in the faces of many, many Canadians that might be on the fence or undecided about, whether or not to vote back Liberal again.
Is it fair to say Mark Carney's at the peak of his honeymoon phase with the public right now? And how does he keep building on that? How does he keep the momentum going?
Optimistically, as a Liberal, I'm going to say he's not at his honeymoon phase yet, simply because a leadership campaign like this is just so, bubbly, right? It's big within Liberal circles, but when you look at the voters that we have to activate as a party, they're not the bubbly Liberals. They're not the Ottawa kind of Laurentian Liberals. They're in the rural regions of the country and in the prairies and on the Atlantic coast and on the BC coast. And so Mark Carney probably hasn't created enough of an image with Canadians yet, and I think we're going to see his popularity or his notoriety still increase now that he is the leader, and when he gets sworn in as prime minister, and then when the writ drops. And I think that is all pointing towards a really short campaign, right? You need to capitalize on that notoriety and on that novelty, which the Conservatives aren't really able to take advantage of, right? They've had Pierre in now for a while, and he's starting maybe to get a little stale when you look at the newness of the Liberal Party.
Yeah, fair enough. His honeymoon phase has come and gone. So projecting forward now that at some point in the next week or two, the formal transition process will be carried out. The Governor General will invite Mark Carney to form a government, and he will become officially Canada's 24th Prime Minister. He will be the 11th Prime Minister from the Liberal Party of Canada, the 9th to take office without having won an election of any kind. So how long do you expect Mark Carney's technical first term to last? Hours, days, weeks? And by that, I mean, how soon after he's officially sworn in do you think he's going to call the election?
Yeah, I think it's safe to say about a week. We still have much to learn about a transition period, but what I'm hearing from people connected to the Carney campaign and connected to the government is that around Thursday, Friday of this week, we'll likely see him sworn in alongside a new cabinet. I think an important part to note here is that when the new prime minister is sworn in, my understanding is that nullifies or means that the current ministry does not exist anymore. And so we can't have a government of one. And so he'll be sworn in, I suspect, alongside a new cabinet. If that happens Thursday, Friday, hearing that an election call could happen Wednesday, Thursday of the following week. So, well before Parliament would have to be sworn in, back from prorogation. So, they'll bring him in as prime minister, have a week ramp up, where I talked about kind of that elections, that pre-election spend, introduce some of their star candidates, and then we're off to the races.
But you think the election call will come before the House is due to resume, I believe that's March 24th?
Yeah, I can't see a path where they survive the House.
Well, I'm just looking at the calendar here as you're talking. So we have election call, let's say it's the 21st, 36-day campaign in this country. Federally in Canada, some people may not know this, elections have to be by law on a Monday. So maybe 21st of April, maybe 28th of April, somewhere in there.
So I think they might go a little bit longer, just because you have Easter in there kind of messing up with things a little bit.
Right.
To put my tinfoil hat on as well, your listeners may have seen a tweet from Mark Carney with members of Blue Rodeo where
I did see that, yes.
That he's choosing between 5 days in May. And obviously that is a Blue Rodeo reference, but I wonder if that's pointing towards May 5th. A bit cleaner. It gets people out of kind of the long weekend Easter environment, gets out of April and a clear kind of, we have April to campaign and then May 5th. I'm not so sure still on the E-Day date. But if I was a betting person, I would put it on May 5th.
Yeah, it's funny. Holidays can be good or bad for political campaigns when they happen to fall during the writ period because people may be tuned out because it's holiday family time. But holiday family time, Nick, I don't know about your family. Mine can be a time for some heated political debate. So people actually do get engaged. I know pollsters look pretty closely at the daily polling that comes out the week after a holiday. So that could be factoring into the equation, right?
Yeah, it could. I mean, it's conversations that happen at our dinner tables when we get together for sure. I think to your point, we need to do the least amount possible. But I don't really want to say too definitively what it will be. We're splitting hairs here. Is it 7 days sooner than you think? We're looking at the end of April for an election.
Right. End of April, early May. Okay, let's move along. So once the election is underway, we've talked about Mark Carney, the feeling of change, revitalization, a new era for the Liberal Party. What do you think some of the winning messages specifically for the Liberal campaign will be? What is their pitch to Canadians with Mark Carney as leader? It's got to start around fiscal responsibility and a return towards the center of things, at least on economic issues, right?
Yeah, fiscal responsibility and the knowledge around that, I think, will be important. We can sit here and talk about how Mr. Carney was a central banker and is responsible and helped work through crises. But I think one thing that they're going to try to message to Canadians is that not only does he have the experience, but he has the knowledge of how. He has the ability to not just communicate fiscal policy well, but he has the ability to actually do it. That will be one side. The other side that I think they will really lean into is a sense of national pride. There was a lot of messaging on Sunday at the Liberal convention about Canada strong and Canada proud and kind of co-opting maybe some of those more right-wing lines and brands. And I think you'll continue to see that. I mean, there were signs there as well that said Carney for Canada. And the room was very, very red and white with a lot of maple leafs. This is going to be a campaign fought on Canadian sovereignty, on Canadian identity, and, separating ourselves from the US and reinforcing our economic system in the face of, what we're seeing from Donald Trump. The Liberal Party is going to message Canadians that Mark Carney is the one who knows how to do it, and the Liberal Party are the ones who have done this before, specifically with Donald Trump. I think that's important to remember here is the Liberal Party has stood up and the Liberal government has stood up to Donald Trump before. We can talk about how different this term is and how Trump 2.0 is different and we need to pivot. But to put my partisan hat on, the Conservatives have not dealt with Donald Trump. Pierre Poilievre has not dealt with Donald Trump. He's not been in a room with him. And so messaging that to Canadians is going to, I think, make or break who wins this campaign.
I want to keep poking, though, and pulling at this thread of the shift, the political shift underway in the Liberal Party. There's a lot of commentary about it already. The fiercest critics of the Trudeau government hold that he brought that party too far to the left. Critics will say under the Trudeau government, especially the last couple of years with the untenable minority parliament situation we had with the supply and confidence deal, there's really no daylight between the NDP and the Trudeau Liberals on that left side of the political spectrum, which leaves opportunity and open space closer to the center. What do you make of the reports that Mark Carney has offered former Conservative MP, former Conservative Party leadership candidate, former Quebec Premier Jean Charest, a role in his government? Is he sending a message there, perhaps?
Trying to, noted progressive conservative Jean Charest. And I think that's what we're going to see is this Carney government moving towards the space that would have traditionally been, held by progressive conservatives. I think that's why, you're seeing Doug Ford come out and be so polite to Mr. Carney and kind of in support of his prime ministership. You're going to see, a move towards bipartisanship in the face of U.S. aggression. I think that's going to be a big message and one that he's showing with Jean Charest. The other name that'll float out there that has been reported in the media is Christy Clark. Again, BC Liberal, but as we know, BC politics is a different beast and would probably be considered, more of a centrist or small c conservative in Ottawa circles. And so, as those conversations continue to happen, the policy, I think, is going to be driven by that desire to move to the center, while leaving space, I will add, for left-leaning or social voices, right? I think Karina Gould's time in politics is not done. I think she showed her mettle during the debates, and she will likely represent more of that left-leaning side of the party. And so we'll see it coming together. I think a cabinet with Karina Gould and Jean Charest in it is one that really represents that unity, that nationalism, and that let's take this on attitude that we've been discussing.
Okay, let's pivot and look a little bit at the other side of the equation. Once the glow of the leadership win begins to fade, Mark Carney is staring down the barrel of a political battle royale with Pierre Poilievre. The Conservative Party is itching for an election. They've been ready to go for 2 years now. Mark Carney has rained on their parade already. They were really hoping to run an election against Justin Trudeau. They no longer have the opportunity to do that. The Poilievre war room has already been on the offensive. So far, the opposition's been trying to define Mark Carney as two things. One, he's carbon tax Carney. He's just like Justin. And two, he's sneaky Mark Carney. He has conflicts of interest. He has ulterior motives, a hidden agenda. It's a 1-2 punch. He's just like Justin, and you can't trust him. He's sneaky. Do you think the Conservatives are hitting at the right weaknesses there, especially around the conflicts of interest, the move of the Brookfield headquarters? Well, Mark Carney was chair of the board. Moving jobs to the U.S. doesn't look good, certainly, at this juncture. And what can Mark Carney do to convince Canadians that he's not just like Justin, nor is he sneaky Mark Carney?
Yeah, I think that what the Conservatives are doing lands well with their base, but I don't think as when we talk about shifting goalposts in terms of who occupies the center and the left and the right, it doesn't do anything to bring on those undecided and those kind of fringe, center left, center right voters. I also think that it reeks, if I can be partisan again for a moment, it reeks of American politics. This kind of giving nicknames to your opponents and sneaky Mark Carney and carbon tax Carney, it comes across as the little Marco or Lion Jeb from the 2016 presidential campaign. But on, to defend Mark Carney a little bit, carbon tax Carney, he said he's going to get rid of a consumer carbon tax. Sneaky Mark Carney, he said when he becomes prime minister, he's going to, put all of his assets in a trust and go through the same ethics process that any MP or candidate would have to do. So I think it's grasping at straws a little bit. I don't think it lands well with Canadians. It's not in Canadians' interest to be calling, your opponent's names and picking fights. And I think to battle against it, the Liberals and Mark Carney will pick up just on that and say, we're here to have a substantive debate. We're not here to put names on people. The Liberals have done well so far to not put, Poilievre, in that kind of name and shame game and put nicknames on him. And they'll point to the fact that, they're going to get rid of the carbon tax and he's going to, do all of these things that the Conservatives are calling on. We can have a conversation about whether or not the Liberals are picking up on policy ideas that the Conservatives are having. But this is a bit of a rug pulling election, right? It's how can you kick the feet out from underneath your own opponent and take the good ideas they have and make them your own and highlight the bad ideas and show how they're detrimental to the country.
Yeah, it's going to be a gloves off campaign from the get-go. There's a fair amount of consensus among the pundit sphere on that front. So then to turn it around, on Sunday at the leadership convention, Mark Carney said of his opponent, Pierre Poilievre, and I quote, "The person who worships at the altar of Donald Trump will kneel before him and not stand up to him. End quote. It's a great line for a room full of liberals who already believe it, but if you're the Carney campaign, how do you prosecute that case to the general voting public? And how integral do you think that will be in the campaign, painting Poilievre as like Donald Trump?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the main message of the campaign, and especially on the kind of negative side. I think the positive side is going to focus much more on what Canada is. But if you're going to prosecute that case, you just have to look at what language Pierre has used in press conferences when he talks about the fake news and when he calls on, outlets that favor him versus don't, or when his, senior advisors are pictured wearing MAGA hats. The case is quite easy to make that he is, Trump-esque in his policies. Look at what we just talked about, David, right? This nicknaming that's very, very right out of the playbook of Donald Trump. I mentioned earlier this idea that they're going to spend a lot of money on ads leading up to the campaign where they don't have caps on spending. I think that's what a lot of these ads are going to focus on, is that in the face of U.S. aggression and U.S. tariff action and threats at the border, you have Pierre Poilievre, parroting the same messages and rhetoric that we are so elbows up against. And it's going to be an easier case to the Canadian public, I think, for the Liberals to paint Pierre as, just like Trump, than it is for the Conservatives to paint Carney as sneaky or whatever adjective they've come up with today.
Okay. We're right about out of time, but just want to ask you one more quick question. Somebody we haven't brought up yet. What do you think will become of Chrystia Freeland? Does she stick around? Does she run again? Does Carney put her in cabinet? Does she part ways with public life and find her happiness elsewhere? What do you think is going to happen to her?
House leader's a great role. I think there's probably a place for her in cabinet. She has done a lot, and I won't discount the fact that she and Mark Carney are very, very, very close friends. She will likely run in her riding, and if the Liberals come into government, GTA seats are going to play a big part in that, and she should be rewarded for that. It should also be reminded that she has significant foreign prowess in terms of her own ability to navigate, within other countries as a diplomat and as a representative of the Canadian government. So she has the skills that we need. At the same time, Mark Carney would probably want some reassurances that she's not going to knife him the way that she knifed the prime minister. And so I'd imagine there's a role for her to play. What that role is, definitely not as senior as finance minister.
Okay, that's another side angle to watch for this whole show. Nick McRoberts, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a great discussion, and hopefully we can have you back on as we make our way to and into the federal election campaign with Mark Carney versus Pierre Poilievre. Nick, thank you again.
Thank you, David. Always glad to be here.
And again, that is Nick McRoberts, a Liberal strategist with Hill Knowlton here in Ottawa, former staffer in the Trudeau government. And that was the big story for today. You can send us feedback on this episode or any other episode. Email us hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. We love hearing from you. You can find us on the Seeker app or on any of your other favorite podcast players. Please remember to rate, follow, review, and share. Until next time, I'm David Smith. Thank you for listening.